guys. Hey, thanks for coming to my channel. Today I am on the Columbia River. It's fall in the Pacific Northwest, so you can see some boats out there on the river fishing. Sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? So today I am going to take just a brief amount of time to talk to you about the theory of traditional Chinese medicine. In the United States, most of us have been trained in traditional Chinese medicine. And so what does that mean? Does that mean anything? Because you'll also hear people talk about, oh, they're a 5-element practitioner, or they're trained in classical Chinese, or they trained in something else that's supposed to be amazing. Here's some of the history of that, okay? So, China. Around 1905, the last of the empires fell, right? The Qing Dynasty fell and the Republic came in. And then maybe around the 30s, 40s, Chairman Mao came in. And that's what set off the precedent for traditional Chinese medicine. So let's see what's happening in the early 1900s in China. So China has the same landmass, about the same landmass as the United States. And at the 1900s, do you realize their population was the same as what we have in the United States today? And here's the key difference. They did not have an industrial revolution. So they didn't have cars, they didn't have flushing toilets, they didn't have running water. And what they did have is they had outhouses. They were still getting their water from wells or from rivers. They were doing their farming, and their radius of exploration or where they could go, it was limited to about 20 miles from where they were standing, because they were still using horses. So really different time, really different world. Now with that, with the lack of an industrial revolution, they also did not have the sanitation that we had here in the United States. So you had pretty large outbreaks of typhus, cholera, tuberculosis, malaria, all those really aggressive diseases that are very difficult to treat. And so health became a really big issue for Chairman Mao. And part of the problems with trying to provide health care to such a large population at the time was that they didn't have enough practitioners. What they did have is they had a lot of acupuncturists, a lot of herbalists, a lot of people who were practicing what we kind of think of as traditional Chinese medicine today. And so what Mao did is he brought in about 10 of what were considered the top practitioners at the time, brought them into the capital, and they worked together to define what we call traditional Chinese medicine. Now, here's the one key significance with traditional Chinese medicine is Mao was very serious about being scientific. So there were huge parts of the medicine that were not considered scientific. And those were the spiritual aspects, the emotional aspects, the concept of the Tao. All of that was not considered scientific. What was considered scientific was treating physical disease. And some of the mental diseases that you have, like anxiety, stress, depression, some of those mental diseases are very, I guess you could say physical, but they're very much about, how we live our lives today. Beyond that, he didn't really want to have anything to do with it. So traditional Chinese medicine is really limited to maybe about 75-80% of it is limited to the physical aspects. But what he did do is he spent a lot of time having his practitioners define Zong Fu theory, which is the organ theory, and that's one of the key theories that we use for herbs. And with a lot of effort placed on understanding and learning Zong Fu theory, you can start expanding yourself back into the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the Tao aspects of Chinese medicine. Yet, for us, where we're at today, traditional Chinese medicine, super physical. It was encased in a shell that said, I want this to be scientific. I want this to be proven. I want this to be like the West. I want to be industrialized. And those are the practitioners that he sent out to work with the population, and they did a great job. Why we think of Chinese medicine as something that only China does is because China was the only government that actually institutionalized the medicine. So Japan didn't, Korea didn't, India didn't. None of these other countries institutionalized this medicine into the government. China did. So when people think about acupuncture, they think about herbs, they think about China, even though that's not the only place where they were practicing acupuncture, herbs, forms of Qigong, meditation. They were practicing that all over. And China just institutionalized it, and then they exported it, which was good for us. And so that's traditional Chinese medicine. It really came in with Mao. It was limited, didn't want any of that foo-foo, woo-woo stuff in there. And so then you start looking at classical Chinese medicine, which is before Mao. And classical Chinese medicine, usually they lean more to 5 elements. And even though there's a flash of 5 elements that's taught in traditional Chinese medicine, it's probably like a chapter. It's almost like Western medical doctors. They get maybe 1 credit of nutrition and vitamins and minerals. That's kind of what 5 elements is in traditional Chinese medicine. It's like a chapter. And so if you really want to study more with 5 elements or classical Chinese, you really have to expand beyond traditional Chinese medicine. And I believe there's a huge reason to do that, because it just opens up so many neat, amazing doorways for you to walk through and for you to really, really change your life. Yet, here we are at the Han Dynasty. Let's look at the Han Dynasty. It was around 221 BC to 200 and something AD. And this was like a golden age for China. And this was where they took 5 elements and they actually really put it into a medicine, where they actually took all the information and wrote it down in books and actually had a theory on what it was and how it worked in the body. And it's really amazing. It's really hard to find people who really focus on 5 elements and who know about 5 elements today. But when you do, it really just opens up and expands Chinese medicine for you. And one of the concepts was the concept of Yin and Yang. And I was reading something from a practitioner from before Mao. So what they were studying was the books before Mao had sanitized them all. And they had a perspective of Yin and Yang. And here's my thing is, I remember when I was in school, there was a quote from some amazing person, so amazing that they quoted them. But this person had said that you could study Yin and Yang forever and never understand it. And I thought, well, not if you're studying traditional Chinese medicine, because it's pretty black and white in traditional Chinese medicine, and it's really limiting, and I couldn't see how you could spend a lifetime studying that. In fact, apparently I only had to spend a semester studying that, and I had all I needed for traditional Chinese medicine. And I was reading this book, and they were describing Yin and Yang, and they were seeing a different aspect of yin and yang, and I had to sit down and I had to think about it, and all of a sudden I could see the way they were seeing it. And of course there's a book that I bought on Amazon, so I was reading through the reviews, and it was so funny because there was one person who wrote a review and said, this person doesn't know what yin and yang is, this is completely wrong, and I've taught, and I'm an acupuncturist or a Chinese medical provider, and I've talked to all the people I know who practice Chinese medicine, and none of them see yin and yang like that. I'm like, okay, first off, Chinese medicine isn't black and white, so if you're saying it's black and white like that, I'm going to go to the next practitioner, because it doesn't work like that. And yet I could completely understand what they were saying, because if you had limited yourself to what you learned in the sanitized version from Mao, yin and yang were, the dark side of the moon, the light side of the moon, the sun, the moon, the earth, the sky, just really black and white issues. Whereas yin and yang is more than all of that. It's about relativity. It's where you are relative to something else, and how that works. And so when you talk to somebody and they say, I'm a 5-element practitioner, what they're saying is, maybe I didn't even study traditional Chinese medicine. Maybe I went to a 5-element school and studied 5 elements, and that's all I've studied. And so I am more focused on the whole person. Actually, I don't even know what they're more focused on. I know that for me, 5 elements has really opened up my practice and has really opened up a really unique aspect of Chinese medicine, which is dealing with our emotions, our destiny, our spiritual well-being. And you know what? I didn't realize that it wasn't until around the Han Dynasty, I think maybe around 1000 AD, that the practitioners allowed people to treat people's destiny, people's emotions, people's spiritual well-being, because they didn't think that, and why they didn't do it before is because they didn't think that they had the right to change somebody's destiny. And so oh my gosh, that is such an interesting conversation. We'll have to have a conversation on destiny and what it means in Chinese medicine, because it's such an amazing topic. Yet they didn't believe that they had the right to change somebody else's destiny. You're supposed to come into this world, you make a decision on what you're going to learn and what you're going to do. So it was your decision to do whatever it is that you're doing, and it wasn't their right to change that, even if you asked them to change it for them. That you were kind of tired of this ride and you'd like a different ride. And part of that, though, is that whole concept of Confucius, where you're supposed to stay in line, you're supposed to stay in place, you're not supposed to upset the apple cart, you're supposed to do what you're told and just be happy with that. And in China, when you're dealing with an emperor and you're dealing with family lineages where the power passes through the family, and where they don't even want to share the power. So if you're a commoner, they don't even want you to participate. Telling people to accept your destiny, there's a benefit to that. They accept their destiny and they'll stay wherever they are, and they'll allow the status quo to stay the status quo. So it wasn't until the Song Dynasty, which was another golden age in Chinese medicine, where the Song Dynasty was another golden age for China, period. Just the amount of learning, the amount of open-minded acceptance, just the amount of expansion that happened during that dynasty was amazing. And it wasn't until that dynasty that they were like, no, you don't have to stay in your box. You can come out and you can participate in other areas. And so it wasn't until that time that they allowed 5 elements to help you change your destiny. Good for us, huh? Because some of us were like, oh my gosh, I am so tired of feeling or thinking that. And now with Chinese medicine, you can change it. So now we know a little bit about Chinese medicine and where traditional Chinese medicine came from, where classical or 5 elements came from, and how they relate to how we practice today. And I hope that gives you some information to think about. We'll have to come back and talk about destiny because that is such an amazing topic, and I'd love to share information on that with you. But until next time, I'll catch you on the other side.